So let's say you have a 6-sided dice, a regular, non-biased 6-sided dice. Now you know from early maths that the probability of it landing on any of the 6 sides will be 1/6, given that the dice is actually fair. So then 6 of your friends came along and they said, hey, let's play a little game with the dice. In fact, let's have some bets, let's do a bit of gambling with the dice. Now obviously your friends need someone to keep hold of the dice and roll it, make sure it's fair, and so that's where you come in. You're just going to roll the dice and your friends are the ones gambling, so you know, you're not actually joining the fun. So then you set up some rules that your friends can put some money in, betting on which number it will land on the dice. And if they win, they'll win 6 times the money that they put on. So if they put on £1, they'll get £6 if it lands on their number. So I'll draw a little odds table looking a bit like this, including, you know, the payments if, you know, your friend won. So as you can see here, if your friend chooses a certain outcome of the dice between number 1 to 6, and if he places a £1 bet on it, and then the dice lands on that side that he bet on it, he'll get £6, which is the £1 he paid plus the £5 he won. So your friend thought, hey, that's quite fair, so let's play this little game. So each of your 6 friends put a £1 on each of the 6 outcomes. You roll the dice, it comes out a certain face, 5 of your friend loses some money, and 1 of your friend just gains £5 extra. And so your friend have fun, some of them lose some money, but whatever. But then you sit down and you think, hey, this is my dice. Shouldn't I be, you know, trying to make some money off it? Just because, why not? So you thought, hey, how can I make some money out of, you know, this dice game? And so you had a great idea. So you decided to change the betting odds slightly. So now your friend, instead of winning £6 if his side of the dice comes up, he'll only win £5. So now the odds change slightly, so that if your friend puts a £1 on a certain side to come up, and that side comes up, he'll only win £5, which is £1 he originally bet and £4 extra. So that looks a bit better for you, because each of your 6 friends will put a £1 each, so you get £6 originally, you roll the dice, and then, you know, for whatever side that comes up, you'll lose £5 to the winner. And so every round that you play, you're gaining £1 by just rolling the dice and making sure no one's cheating. You getting £1 per round. You're going to be fat by the end of it, trust me. So now one of your friends, who was constantly betting on the number 5 to come up, started to get a bit mad because he kept losing money. And he just left. And he thought, hey, that's a bit odd. Number 5 didn't come up for quite a while now. So you pick up the dice and you realise something. That the dot that was on the number 5 fell off. And so now all this time, that side that's supposed to be a 5 is a 4 because that central dot fell off. And you were like, oh no, that's why. And so at that point you realise that the odds are no longer fair because, you know, you're more likely to get a 4 than to get any other number. Your friend who was already betting on a 4 decided that his number was now twice likely to come up, so he decided to put £5 on it. And all your other friends who was betting on the other number thought that, hey, if the odds for the 4 is the same, but it's more likely to come up, then let's put our money onto the number 4. So everybody decides to put all their money onto the number 4. Now yes, you probably realise a little problem. It's okay if the dice lands on another number, but if dice lands on a 4, you're going to go bankrupt in paying everybody else the winning because all the money's there. And so clearly you can see that the odds that you set out no longer works. You have to change this odd so that it fits with a new probability and with the new amount of money people are betting. Because obviously in this case, people are going to want to bet on the 4, because since all the odds, all the payout and stuff are all the same, the 4 is more likely. So you thought, hey, why bet on another number when the 4's the best chance of getting some money off this dude who's been scamming out money for the last half hour? So you came back out with new odds. You decide to slash the payout rates for the number 4. So instead of having the odds as 5, you have it as 2.5. So now instead, if you place a bet onto number 4 and the dice do land on number 4, you'll only get £2.5 back rather than getting £5 like all the other numbers. So now your friends start to think whether it is worth it to actually put your money onto the number 4. Because yes, while number 4 is more likely to come up than all the other numbers, the payout is not as great as all the other numbers. The risk in betting the number 4 might be lower than the other numbers, but the reward is also less. So that kind of discouraged your friends from betting on the number 4 again, because they thought, hey, let's go for the bigger risk and for the bigger reward. So everybody else just goes back to sticking £1 on their original number, except for that one guy whose lucky number is probably 4, but even he realized that putting £5 on the line is a bit too much, so he only bets £2. So now this game goes back into your favor again. So your friends in total put £6 on the table. £1 on 1, 2, 3, and 6, and £2 on the 4 because of your one really rich friend or whatever. If the dice lands on 1, 2, 3, or 6, you'd have to give £5 to the winner, which is £1 he originally bet plus £4 in winning. And then you make £1. However, if the dice lands on a 4, whose probability, if you can remember, is 2/6, and the odds, the payout is 2.5, if dice lands on that number, you'll have to give £5 to the winner, which is £2 that he originally bet, plus 3 extra pounds in the actual winning. And again, you'll gain £1, so it really doesn't matter what side dice comes up. Any possibilities either way, you'll get £1 per round. And that's just brilliant. Except you lose all your friends once they realise that you're just making money off them. So that dice example that you just saw is kind of how bookmakers work, although in real life it's much more complicated. First off, it's much easier to find the probabilities of each side coming up on the dice. I could just look at the sides and be like, the probability of this number coming up is so and so on. But for something like a game of football, it's much harder to find the probabilities of who's going to win or who's going to lose. There are loads of different factors you need to take into consideration. You have to consider the form that the team is on. Maybe a certain team has got some home advantage. Maybe in the past few years, one of the teams has always been beating the other team. You might have to consider the manager of the team. Maybe one of the team just recently appointed a new manager. Maybe one of the teams stuck with the old manager despite of him not winning any league titles in the last 10 years. You have to take into consideration the injuries or the suspension the team has, and there's just loads of different factors you need to consider before you can arrive to some certain probability of who's going to win a game of football. But after you find the probabilities of each outcomes, then you have to take that probability and turn them into books. Turn them into the odds so that people can bet on it. And the bookmakers have to make the books so that no matter what the outcome of the event is, the bookmakers are going to make money. It's a bit like our example. It doesn't matter what side dice comes up, I'll always be making £1. And that's what the bookmakers are trying to do, just trying to make money off every bet. So I'll give you an example of a book that was made by a certain bookmaker. I'll take the odds from the opening game, the English Championship, between Nottingham Forest and Burton Albion. Here are the odds from a certain bookmaker that I just took off the internet, as you can see here. Now the odds are expressed as both fractional odds and as decimal odds. They both mean the same thing, just expressed in different ways. Now basically, if I were to put £1 on Nottingham Forest winning and Forest wins, I'll get £1.8 back. And similar things can be said for the other outcomes. Now for books like these, we can find something called the implied probability, which will equal to 1 divided by the decimal odds. So for example, this bookmaker is saying the odds of Forest beating Burton Albion is 1.8, and so their implied probability of that happening would be 1 divided by 1.8, which is about 55.6%. Now what can these implied probabilities show? Well, let's go back to our dice example and consider it there. So first, let's consider the example where you weren't trying to scam money of other people. When if they place some certain amount of money on a certain number and that number comes up, you'll pay them back 6 times the original money they bet on. At that time, the decimal odds were 6. And so if you find the implied probability from that decimal odds, you get 1 over 6, which matches the probability of each side of the dice coming up. And if you try to find the implied probability for all the numbers and you add them all up, you will get 1 or 100%, which represents a fair book. And what the fair book means is that if all the bets are placed and distributed according to the probabilities of each side coming up, then you won't actually gain any money. You won't actually lose any money because all the money you make from the bets, you will actually have to pay out to the winner. But then consider the second example where you tweak the odds a bit. Rather than having the odds at 6, you have the odds at 5. If you find the implied probability from that odds, you will get 1 over 5, which is greater than the actual probability of any side of the dice coming up. With the odds that you set out, you're implying that the odds of the number 4 coming up is more likely than it actually is. And so basically your odds are paying out a lower reward for a risk that's actually greater than what it looks on paper. Because if the probability of a certain event happening is 1 over 6, you should be paying 6 times the money in winnings, but you're only paying 5 times, which means you're actually paying out too little. If you try to find the implied probability from the odds that you set out for all the different outcomes in that second example, and you add them all up, you'll get a total probability of 6 over 5, or 120%. But wait a minute, shouldn't probabilities all add up to 100%? That was the bit in maths that you've learned since you were really young. So what's happening here? Why doesn't the implied probability add up to 100%? Well, this bit is what we call over-rounding, and it happens all the time with bookmaking. The fact that they over-round means that they're actually paying out less than what they're gaining in bets. If £120 worth of bets are placed on the different outcomes and distributed according to the probability of each event coming up, then the bookmakers would only have to pay out £100. That's what the 120% means. So going back to the book, to the odds between Nottingham Forest and Burton Albion, as you can see here, if we find the implied probability of each event coming up, you'll get something like this. And if you add all the implied probabilities of all these 3 odds, you'll get a value of 124%, which is greater than 100%. This means if £124 worth of bets are placed and distributed along the 3 outcomes, then the bookmakers will only be expected to pay out £100, and the bookmakers will make £24 of profit per every £124 bet. And that's how they make money, by over-rounding all of their books. And you can just check all of the different odds and stuff, and you will see that all the books are over-rounded. Premier League games are usually over-rounded at a margin of about 101% to 120%. But then one other important thing that the bookmaker have to do is change the odds over time, because the probability of something happening in the sports world could really change overnight, and will definitely change over a long period of time. Maybe a certain team lost their key man, and that seriously hurts their chances of winning, or possibly one of the other reasons that they have changed the odds is because people are starting to bet on that outcome more, and they don't want to risk losing money if that outcome turns out to be true, so they have to start lowering the odds so that they would pay less if that outcome happens. Now I'll give you a football related example of this. I won't give you an actual odds for a certain match, but for who was going to win the league, the Premier League 2015-16. Let's look at the odds for Leicester City winning the league. Really earlier on the season, bookmakers put the odds of Leicester winning the league at 5,000 to 1, or in decimal odds 5,001. Now you can find the implied probability of that, and you find that that comes out to a really, really small number, which means the bookmakers aren't even considering Leicester to be title contenders. Yes, and at that really high risk, despite of a rather high reward, people just chose not to bet it. But then eventually, as the season progresses, Leicester's good run just continues and eventually sees them going to the top of the table. And as Leicester City's good run continues and they're more likely to win the league as time goes on, the bookmakers were forced to start lowering the odds for Leicester winning the league, lowering it more and more as time goes on. Now at this point, if the bookmakers decide to keep the odds of Leicester City winning the league at 5,001, then they might be in a bit of trouble. Well, as the season unravels itself and Leicester eventually climbs their way to the top of the league, people will start to realise something. People will start to realise that Leicester are more and more likely to win the Premier League. But if their odds are staying the same, then that means they could get quite a high reward for a lower risk, because Leicester are already on the top, their risk of winning the actual league is going to be lower. And that would mean more people would bet on Leicester winning the league. And if Leicester wins the league, the bookmakers will have to pay huge money to many people at a very high payout rate. And what did they do? Well, they eventually started cutting down the odds of Leicester winning the league to make it more likely, to make the payout rates a lot lower. And so by the end of the season, the odds of Leicester winning the league went from 5,001 down to 1.2. And the bookmakers had to change this odd because of what's actually happening. Because of Leicester's good run, because all the other teams are just messing up, and also because people are actually starting to bet on Leicester winning the league. So they have to always keep adjusting the odds so that they would actually make profit. But for the bookmakers, they don't really care who wins, because whatever the outcome is, the bookmakers always win. So really guys, just don't bet. Just don't give them the money, alright?